This is Reed Seals for AM 1340 WGRV. I'm here with Phil Bredesen, who is running for U.S. Senate on the Democrat ticket. First off, Phil, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as I think most of your listeners know, I was the governor here prior to the current one from 2003 to 2011, and before that I was the mayor of Nashville for 8 years, and before that in the business world. This is not something I was expecting to do, but I think the problems have gotten to the point where I feel like I need to step forward and try to help bring some common sense back to Washington.
And why did you decide to run for election? You kind of touched on that a little bit, but do you want to elaborate on it?
Sure. I really believe that our government, and it's really over the past decade and a half, has gotten caught in this loop of just everybody standing on opposite sides of the rooms and shouting at each other and never getting anything done. During my time as governor, I think I did exactly the opposite, that I found ways to bring the two parties together and found some common ground for people, and we moved a lot of things forward, from solving problems like with the ones we had with 10 Care to some major improvements in the K through 12 and in the higher education system. So I'd like to go to Washington and bring some of those skills and that attitude with me to try to help be one of the oars in the water about trying to get this government working again, away from this hyper-partisanship and toward the kind of common sense that I think most Tennesseans have. You don't have to get everything you want every time. You need to make some compromises and move things forward and solve some problems.
And what do you think is the biggest issue that the United States is currently facing?
Well, I think we have a number of issues. Domestically, I think the biggest issue is just that with globalization and technology, there have been people who've been left behind economically. We've had stagnation in wages for the middle class now for 25 years. I think there are solutions to those problems, and I very much would like to work to help solve them. I mean, I'd like to see a vigorous government that's really focused on creating opportunity and for the middle class and working class people in this country, and a little less oriented to what the very rich need. And I think we can do that.
And narrowing it down a little bit, what do you think is the biggest issue that Tennessee is facing currently?
Well, I think Tennessee very much faces that same issue of stagnation in wages and the like. We have relatively low unemployment now, but the quality of the jobs needs improvement. The stability of them, the kind of benefits that people have. I very much would like to work on that. I think there's also significant issues in Tennessee with health care. There are different issues depending on the part of the state. In some areas, it has to do with the cost to health care, cost of pharmaceuticals in particular. In other parts of the state, in some of the more rural parts, it's a straight access kind of issue. They're just, hospitals are closing, and it's hard to get doctors located in a number of these rural communities. That's the field that I know something about. It's where I was in the private sector. I did a lot of work in the public sector on health care, and I would love to start helping to solve some of those problems that are facing Tennessee here today with that.
And what are some of your other plans if you are elected?
Well, I think one of the most important things that anybody can, I think one of the most important ways in which people should make their choice is just to say that, look, there are things that will come up during the course of a senator's term which were not expected. You think of things like this Russian interference in the election, which has come up, which was not an election issue per se, but it's become a significant issue. So I think that in making the choice, people ought to be looking at people who they think have the ability to evaluate these questions fairly, and in whom they have confidence that the answers that they come up with, won't be ideological playbook answers, but practical answers that actually will solve the problem. I think that's an area which I've got a really good long track record of just being able to get things done and solve problems, and I hope people will take that into account.
And is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
Just, it is a great honor to even be considered for an office like this. my fundamental principle. There are people in your listening area who are for me, and I'm sure some who are for my opponent. And I just want everybody to know that when I'm elected, I'm going to regard myself as the senator responsible to every person in the state of Tennessee, whether they were for me or not, whether they like me or not, whether they agree with me or not. I think everybody is entitled to a respectful hearing, and that's the way I plan to conduct myself.
That was Phil Bredesen. He is running for U.S. Senate on the Democrat ticket. This is Reed Seals for AM 1340 WGRV.